when I go to my drop-down rule sheet, we're going to use that ID that we've created in combination with the concept of aliases that we covered previously to assign and distinguish between these two different drop-down names and what their respective drop-down values should be. So first, I'll drag in the initial UI control, and I will automatically get an error because I don't have any filter criteria. I've just dragged in the actual entity itself. So let's distinguish between these two by first saying that this initial UI control will be for the base coverage UI control. And let's say that the ID of it equals base coverage. Now, in order to have multiple of these UI controls that are being filtered and delineated between, let's assign this an alias of UI control 1. And you'll see how I have now overwritten all of these different instances of UI control with this new alias. We'll get into now the secondary UI control that I'd also like to add in here. So underneath container UI control, I'll drag in another, and let's call this one UI control 2. Same idea with this one. I will drag this in and define that its ID should be, what should it be? Residence type. Copy this to my clipboard. And lastly, what I'll do to make sure that none of the data coming in gets filtered out unnecessarily, considering I just want to distinguish between these two entities. I don't want to remove either of them from being processed by this rule sheet. So I'm going to go up here underneath UI. You'll see that because I created these filters, I will have this little caret that can be expanded. And for each of these, I'm going to disable the actual filter. So right click, disable, or clicking on the filter itself, this little quadrant icon here is going to have the same effect. So you'll notice that nothing happened. It's not as if I disabled the entirety of this filter, which I could have done for testing purposes later on, but I'm disabling the actual aspect that will filter out any data. So all that remains here is a filter for the purpose of identifying what UI control 2 is versus UI control 1. Now that I have distinguished between the two of them, I can go into here and make sure that I am assigning the correct alias name for the distinct options across the two UI controls. So I will now have the 4 different options in a dropdown for UI control 1, which will be populating out the UI control that is the multiple choice with the ID of base coverage, and likewise doing the same but with UI control 2 being that which has the ID of residence type, and having these 6 additional UI control dropdowns about the actual structure itself.